Hello and welcome everyone to the third class of the Secure Websites Masterclass. In today's class, we're going to be learning about website settings. This is going to involve settings on the website itself, such as in the WordPress dashboard. It's also going to involve some work in the web hosting control panel, and also some settings on a couple of different Google services. The point of today's class is to teach you how to basically configure your website to where your secure site will then be accessible to the public. So at the end of today's class, people will be able to visit your website and they will automatically be taken to your secure website. Now, before I dive into all this, because the work today will then make your site start displaying using the HTTPS address, it is worth mentioning that for some websites, the work that we will do today might be the only thing that you need to do to your website to get it configured. However, there are certain websites, depending on how you have set them up, that may need some additional work to make some or possibly all of the pages completely secure. So with that in mind, if you go through the work today and you discover that there are still some pages on your site that are not yet secure, we will be covering that in the next class. And my site is actually one of these sites where it won't be completely secure at the end of today's work. So I will be pointing this out to you as we progress through today's lesson, just so you can tell whether or not this is something that is occurring on your website or not. Now, with that said, we basically have three different parts to this class. First, we're going to be taking a look inside of WordPress itself and configuring a few settings there. Then we're going to move on to the hosting control panel. And finally, we will move on to some of the Google services. So to start with, the first thing that I need to mention here, and this may not apply to everybody's website, but a decent number of WordPress websites will utilize some kind of caching plugin, where when somebody visits a page on your site, WordPress will basically store that page and then deliver that stored page to people's web browser. And this basically just increases or decreases the amount of time that it takes to load up a page. So this is something that is fairly common on a lot of WordPress sites. However, on a default WordPress site, this is not going to be enabled automatically. So some of you may need to worry about this part. Others may be able to completely ignore this first piece. Basically, if you're using any of these WordPress caching plugins, you need to make sure that you disable the caching feature within that plugin. Now, there are a number of different plugins that will do this, so I can't exactly direct you to, an exact setting or something like that to be able to accomplish this. You could potentially just completely disable the entire caching plugin for now, and then when you finish all of the work for securing your site, then you can go back in and re-enable it. If you can find the individual setting for it just to temporarily disable the caching, that's quite okay to do as well. However, you will also want to make sure that you are clearing out the existing cached pages. That way, once this work is complete and you enable the plugin again, then it will start caching these pages from scratch. Basically, without doing this particular step, if you just leave caching turned on, then some of your users, maybe even yourself, when you visit the site, may not see the site securely. It might be delivering parts of the site that have not been modified based on the work that we will be taking care of today, and even in the final class next time. And one of the most important things that you need to worry about inside of WordPress is the default website address. Within WordPress, when you go to Settings and then General, you're going to have two default URLs that are showing up for your site. These URLs are going to control not just the URL that somebody actually visits when they go to your domain name, but it's also going to control a number of things that are kind of happening in the background. If you have various plugins that load up JavaScript files on your site, or CSS files that change the design of certain things on your site, if you also embed media directly into your site, where you're uploading the pictures and directly embedding it through media here, or potentially through an individual page or a post. These URLs here are going to be reflected within a lot of those other URLs that then get embedded into your site. So you basically just need to update both of these and change the HTTP to HTTPS. This initial step right here will actually cause your site to start displaying in its secure mode, assuming you have set up the SSL certificate correctly. However, there may still be some other pieces to it in terms of getting your site to actually be secure. There might be some images that you have manually embedded into your website, for example, and those will not automatically get changed by simply changing these couple of settings here. But this is where you want to get started off, at least. Change those two addresses and save your changes. Once you have done this, then when you go and visit your website, you should start seeing this showing up under HTTPS. At least the things in the background will begin showing up as HTTPS. But again, there are some more elements to this. We have not actually forced the website to display as a secure website yet. So, for example, when I just visit my website using the address that I normally have, if I click around to various links and things of that nature, I'm actually not accessing the secure website quite yet, because websites can exist in both the HTTP and the HTTPS address. So just those couple of WordPress settings do not necessarily force this upon your users yet. We will, however, be moving on to a step here in just a few that is actually going to accomplish this for us, to where people don't get a choice whether or not to access the secure or non-secure version. You can force everybody to access your site securely. Before I move on to that, though, I want to mention one more thing within the WordPress dashboard itself here, and that is the sitemap. Now, not everybody uses a sitemap. I personally use a sitemap plugin called Google XML Sitemap. And this actually updates itself. It's not something where I have to go and generate a new version of this sitemap after I have made changes. I can go and verify this by actually viewing the sitemap itself from within the plugin. You can see all of my addresses here are now reflected as HTTPS addresses instead of the previous HTTP. However, some older versions of this same plugin and potentially even some other sitemap plugins may not automatically update or refresh the sitemap from just making a simple settings change like I just did. So it's worth taking a quick look at your sitemap plugin if you are using one. And if there is a place where you can refresh or regenerate the sitemap, I would recommend to go ahead and do so after changing that WordPress setting. And then you can go and view your actual sitemap just like I did and verify that your addresses are now showing up as HTTPS. Also, if you happen to not be using any kind of a sitemap plugin yet, I would highly recommend to go ahead and install one. This particular plugin, as I said, is called Google XML Sitemaps. You can find it just by going through WordPress, go to plugins and add new, and just search for Google XML Sitemaps and get this installed on your site. The reason why you don't have to have a sitemap plugin, but the reason why it is something that I recommend for you to do is because ultimately Google and other search engines will get notified that you have this sitemap and even changes that get made to this sitemap. And so this will help a brand new website end up getting all of its pages indexed a lot faster. For an existing website, though, this will actually help to get your pages updated faster. So if you're switching a site from being a non-secure site that's accessed through HTTP and switching it to a secure website, just like I am doing, to where your addresses will then change to HTTPS. Obviously, one of the major benefits of this is, to get the increased Google ranking. Well, that increased Google ranking is actually not going to occur or start happening yet until Google indexes your site using all of the HTTPS addresses. So the faster you can get this to happen, the better off you will be, the faster you will actually start to see those changes within the Google search engine. Now, this is also something that I will be coming back to in just a little while. When we go on to the Google services, we're going to use this sitemap. We will resubmit this sitemap to Google just to ensure that your pages will get indexed faster. So basically what's happening on Google does know the difference between a secure and a non-secure website. They realize that people have an HTTP and an HTTPS address for the same page in a lot of cases, but the Google search engine itself doesn't really differentiate between the two. It might believe that they are two completely separate pages of your website. And ultimately, you want to get all of your HTTP addresses switched over to HTTPS within Google, not just for the sake of better rankings, but you don't really want Google to have both of these pages indexed. you want them to switch all of your existing indexed pages to this new address. This also helps with issues such as duplicate content, where it might believe that you have two pages on your site that have the exact same content, one being the HTTP page, the other one being the HTTPS page. So that's one of the big reasons for wanting to have this sitemap in use. However, we will also be taking additional steps to ensure that this does not actually happen, that you only have one of those two versions of each of the pages on your site actually get indexed by Google at a time. Now, before I jump over into the Google services, there are a couple of things that we need to take care of in the control panel. The first of these is actually a file that may or may not exist already. Within Control Panel, if you go into your file manager, and then you navigate to the public HTML directory of your website, if you're on a shared hosting account, you may have to go a little bit deeper than this though. On this particular shared hosting account of mine, I have one site set as the main domain, and then I have the site that I'm actually working on set as an add-on domain. So this public HTML directory is for that main domain name and not actually for the site that I'm working on. So to get to the base directory of the site that I'm working on, I need to navigate into the Down Comforter Guide folder here. So this is the base directory of the site that I am actually working on now. Within this base directory, we're going to be looking for and or messing with two particular files here. The first one is called robots.txt. However, there will be a lot of sites, especially WordPress sites, where there is no file called robots.txt. And this is actually a good thing. It kind of makes it easier if you're not seeing this robots file here. So between README and WP Activate, I should be seeing this file if it exists, but it does not exist. Now, I actually do not need to create this file, but it's important to understand whether or not the physical file actually exists or not. Because within WordPress, if the physical file does not exist, a virtual file for robots.txt actually gets generated for you. And you can verify this for yourself. So I've been able to see through the file manager that there is no robots.txt file. However, if I type in robots.txt on the end of my domain name here, and I try to visit this page, I can see that there actually is a file like this that exists. But again, this is not a real physical file. This is being generated virtually by the WordPress software. Now, some of this information can vary as far as what is actually within this file, because the things that are getting added to or generated in this file typically will come from the different plugins that you have installed on your site. So sometimes you may see a pretty small, short robots.txt file like what you're seeing on my screen. Other times it may be extremely long and have quite a bit of information in it. Ultimately, though, you're not necessarily looking to add something to this file. Instead, you're looking to make sure that something does not exist in this file. This would be code that would prevent your site from actually being able to have the HTTPS pages indexed. Now this can technically come in a couple of different forms. Within the guidebook for today's class, I have included this code that you see here on my screen. And what is basically happening here is it is looking for a condition that is occurring in the URL of your website. So here, this condition is that it's looking to see if your site is being accessed with HTTPS. And if it is turned on, then it's going to follow this next line. If you see something like this within your robots.txt file, it is going to need to be removed. Again, this is not code that you want to be adding to your file. You just want to verify that it's not there. And if it is, you're going to need to remove it. Now, if you do see something like this, it's going to potentially be a little bit tricky to remove, is kind of the one piece of bad news. If your file does not physically exist, then it's all being generated through WordPress. So you would have to identify which plugin you have installed on your site that would be creating this file. In a lot of cases, though, plugins will kind of identify themselves within this robots.txt file. So in this example, I can see here that this code is being generated by the SEO Ultimate plugin. So I could simply identify where code such as this was originating from by looking for the tags that surrounds the code. And then I could go in and try to identify the setting that is actually creating that code. So I would want to try to disable the setting that I believe might be creating that code. And then I could come back to this robots.txt file and refresh it and see if I'm able to get that code to go away. You could also potentially just disable the plugin entirely. If you know it's coming from a specific plugin, but you are not able to identify which plugin it's coming from, you could potentially just start disabling plugins one at a time to figure out where it is coming from, and then decide whether or not it's important for you to have that plugin, or maybe go and further inspect the settings that are available once you can identify the plugin and see if it's something that you can just turn off individually. Hopefully, though, this is not something that would be happening on your site. Most sites will not automatically block the traffic or search engine traffic coming to these secure pages. But there are at least some configurations of sites that might be utilizing something like this. And so it is at least important to ensure that this is not the case. Basically, if you were to have that code within this robots.txt file, when a search engine comes along and tries to cache or index a page on your site, that code can actually block it from being able to get to your secure pages. This is really only something that would be utilized on a site where you have both secure and non-secure pages on the site, and you only wanted the non-secure pages to get indexed, and you wanted it to ignore all of these secured pages. But again, this is not a very common setup these days. If you have the SSL certificate set up on your site, you should probably just be directing all traffic to the HTTPS address, and so therefore you would not want any of that to actually end up getting blocked. Now, in addition to the robots.txt file, there is another file that we need to go and mess with. You also find this in the same way. You go into File Manager. Within File Manager, you navigate to the base directory of your website. Once you are in that base directory, you're looking for a file called .htaccess. If for some reason you do not see this file though, go up here to Settings and make sure that this Show Hidden Files box is actually checked. With this checked, you'll be able to see the file. If I were to uncheck this though and save, you can see my htaccess file actually disappears. So this would be the most common reason why you wouldn't find this file. There is maybe a slim possibility that this file won't exist at all on your site. However, within WordPress, typically this file ends up getting generated for you because this is actually crucial to the normal operation of the WordPress system. So if this file really does not exist at all, there's probably some other issues going on with your website itself, because really WordPress will not function correctly without it. So 100% of WordPress sites should end up having this file, and you won't have to worry about actually creating this yourself. So what we're looking to do this time is to add some code to this file. This file is going to be pulled up by a web browser anytime somebody tries to visit your website, visit any pages on your website, or even visit resources on your website, such as using the address of an image on your site. So what we want to do is utilize this file to ensure that all of our traffic on our site is actually pulling it up from the HTTPS address. So to do this, we're going to edit the file. We click on Edit once again. You make sure this file is selected before you click on Edit up top here. Then you click on the Edit button, and you will get to the actual coding of the file. Now this is something, again, that WordPress will write to. This is something that various plugins within WordPress will actually add code to this file as well. So in some cases, you might find a very small htaccess file using just this code down here at the bottom. You can see WordPress has tagged the default code that it is going to be using, or that is added into this file. Other plugins, such as the iThemes security plugin that I'm using, is actually adding the rest of the code that is found here. So this kind of works in a similar manner to the robots.txt file, as far as most plugins or even WordPress itself will kind of tag itself to let you know that it has added particular bits of code here. So what I'm looking to do now is to add some new code into this particular file. I want to do this up at the top of the file. And this code is something that I've provided for you guys in the guidebook as well, under the htaccess section. Now this code is going to take any request to your website, where when somebody tries to visit a page on your website, if it is not using HTTPS, it will redirect that traffic. But most importantly, it's going to use what's known as a 301 redirect. You can see the little 301 number at the end of this particular line. What this means is that you're not only redirecting traffic, but you're letting the browser know, you're letting search engines know, most importantly, that this redirect is permanent, that the old page that you were trying to access has now permanently moved to this new page. So this is what is going to cause Google to not only de-index all of the HTTP addresses for your site, but it will switch them over to the HTTPS address. This is also really important from the perspective of search engine rankings, because assuming your existing site has some search engine rankings already, this will cause all of that to transfer over. So you won't end up losing those rankings. You won't end up losing backlinks to pages on your website, things of that nature. Now, this code that I've provided for you guys, you simply copy and paste this code into this file with one exception. Right here on this second to last line, you can see the domain name example.com. You simply need to change example.com to your actual domain name. So mine being downcomforterguide.com, I've replaced example.com with downcomforterguide.com. Once I've made this one change and pasted in this code, then I simply save my changes. Now, by saving my changes here and editing this htaccess file, this now allows traffic that is visiting my site to then start using the site securely. So now if I go back to my website and refresh my page, you can see it automatically changed my address up top here, and I am now accessing the site securely using the HTTPS address. To a certain extent, this will take care of a decent amount of the things on your site that actually need to be changed. Between changing the WordPress setting that we changed already and between modifying this htaccess file, even though links on my site may not be using the HTTPS address quite yet, this one change will still kind of force this to happen. So if I try to navigate to a different page that's not yet using this new address, if I copy in my link location here, you can see that this link on my site is still using HTTP. However, if I click on it and try to visit that page, it still loads up using the secure address now. As I mentioned earlier on in this class though, this still does not guarantee that your site will actually be completely secure. There may still be some other elements of your site, things on specific pages of your site that are not being accessed securely yet. And this is something that we will be addressing in the final class of this series. We'll be learning how to not only go through and identify these pieces of your website, but also how to correct this issue. Now you can automatically tell though by just navigating through your website whether there are some other pieces that are not being accessed securely yet, because you will see this little exclamation point on your padlock. So you can see here that my connection is technically not secure yet, because there are other parts of this page that are not secure. So you need to have everything that this page is pulling into it being accessed securely before the actual page itself will truly be secure. I can go ahead and mention to you here that the reason why my page is not showing up as being a secure page yet is actually because of the images that I have on my page. I used custom coding to insert all of not only the images, but the text and things for these menus onto this page. And so these images are not secure. If I copy the location for one of these images, you can see that it's still using the HTTP address. So basically, I would need to go through my site and switch all of these from being HTTP to being HTTPS. Or I would need to use a special way of coding it to allow it to kind of switch back and forth so the images could basically detect what is being done here. And again, this is something I'll be going into detail in the final class with. So we will learn how to get the site completely secured. So at this point though, some people's websites may be entirely secure from just doing the work that I have shown you so far in today's class, whereas other sites, such as mine, will still need this additional work that we will be covering in the final class next time. With that said though, I want to go ahead and move on to the Google settings. I want to take a look at two different Google properties, one of them being the Google Search Console, and the other one being Google Analytics. Ultimately, you may be using both of these. You may not be using either of these. But most websites will use these two different Google properties. At the very least, you should definitely be using Google Search Console. Even if you're not already using it, this will be a good time to go ahead and get it set up. Because the actual work that we need to do on this site right now would be the same whether or not you're already using the Google Search Console. Now, just in case you're not already aware, I've also provided a link to access the Google Search Console within the guidebook for today's class. Basically, when you get into the Search Console and you log in using your email address, for some people, they might load all of their sites onto the same Google account. And so from the main Search Console page, you might see a number of different sites listed, or you may only have one site listed. You just want to click on the name of your site to actually get into your Search Console settings. However, there is actually not an easy way to switch everything over from being HTTP to being HTTPS within the Google Search Console, at least. Even if you could, let's say in the future, Google adds on a new setting that would simply allow you to change your domain name up here and to switch it to HTTPS. I would still recommend leaving the site as HTTP within the Google Search Console and just taking the steps to set up a brand new property within the Google Search Console. The reason why is because of all the stats that you already have there. You have various search analytics, information having to do with links on your site, things having to do with the Google index. And personally, I prefer to leave all this intact because not only can you kind of watch the transition happen from HTTP to HTTPS in terms of search traffic, but you can also see what Google has indexed. And if need be, at a later point in time, you could go back in and actually start removing your HTTP URLs from the Google index. But for now, we don't need to worry about doing stuff like this And in most cases, you won't have to do anything like temporarily removing these URLs because of the work that we did on the htaccess file already. Once Google indexes a new page or one of the existing pages on your site, when they visit the page, that htaccess file is going to tell them that the page has permanently moved from the HTTP address to the HTTPS address. And so within the HTTP stats here, you should start seeing the total number of index pages start to drop over time. And this is completely normal. This is actually what you want to happen. But to still be able to monitor your site through the Google Search Console, and to also help to ensure that this changeover happens as quickly as possible, it's still kind of up to Google how quickly they recheck your site, how quickly they will index your pages. But doing all this work that I'm showing you today will help to simply speed up that process as much as humanly possible. So to still be able to track the secure pages on your site, once Google de-indexes the non-secure pages and re-indexes your site using these secure pages, we just want to add a whole brand new property on. So instead of using http://downcomforterguide.com, I want to go up here, add a new property, and I want this to be the same website, but now using the HTTPS address. So I've typed in https://downcomforterguide.com and another / on the end of it. So exactly the same as I've done here, just adding on this extra S. And now I'm going to add this website in. Now once I have done this, Google is going to prompt me to download an HTML verification file. And then I need to upload this file to my website. And then I need to visit that file in my browser to confirm that it's successfully there. And then I need to simply verify through the Google Search Console here. So first I will go ahead and click here to get this file downloaded. That's going to save the file to my computer. Once I have this file on my computer, then I want to go back to the file manager within the control panel. So again, I am still in the base directory of the website that I am working on right now. And this is where I want to then go and upload this new file. So I click on upload, and then I will select the file from my local computer that I want to now upload. Now, assuming that you have already added this property into Google, you will probably see something like this happening. Once you have selected the file, you'll see that this file actually already exists on the server. This is quite okay though. I'm just going to go ahead and overwrite this file. This file already exists on the server because it's the same file name that we had downloaded when we set up the original property. So once I have done this, this just gives me a way through Google to now verify that I own this site basically. So I can go and I can visit this file. And then I can check that I am not a robot and let Google now verify that the file actually exists. Now, technically, you don't really have to go through that same process that I just walked through as far as downloading the file and uploading it and overwriting it to your website. But I still felt like it was important to show it to you in case you're not already using the Google Search Console. You would still want to go through that same process that I just walked through. But if you already have the HTTP version of that website within the Google Search Console, you could technically just skip down to the bottom and go ahead and verify that the file exists, and it will successfully check out for you. So now that I have added in this new property, and you can also see that my existing property is still there. It's not going to wipe out the HTTP version. It's just going to add in the new version now. But all of my data is now blank. I have no information here within the Google Search Console. So that's also why I like to be able to retain that other property. So once I have this done, over the course of time, as Google starts to visit the pages of my site and switch the index pages from the HTTP to the HTTPS pages, I will start seeing within here stats becoming available. I would be able to see within the Google index that pages of my site are now getting indexed. So within the HTTPS property, when you start seeing that pages are getting indexed, that means that Google is now indexing the secure pages of your site. And at the same time as these pages start ticking up within the normal HTTP property in the Search Console, you should then start seeing that index count decreasing. So to speed up this whole process, as I mentioned before, we can submit a sitemap. This can be done through the link from the dashboard here, submitting a sitemap. You can also go down to crawl and sitemaps to access this same page. So as you can see right now, there are no sitemaps found for my site. So I want to add in a sitemap. So it is prompting me for the address. It already has my domain name entered in for me. So I need to now just enter in the remainder of this file name. Now, if you're using the Google XML Sitemaps plugin, this is going to be sitemap.xml. You can also go to the plugin itself, the settings page. Within this plugin, it makes it pretty clear for you up at the top what the URL of that sitemap file is going to be. Other sitemap plugins, though, will still likely end up giving you this address. If you can't find this address anywhere, though, just try sitemap.xml and see if it works or not. And then if it doesn't, you can start digging a little deeper to try and figure out where that file actually occurs. So all I need to do is type in sitemap.xml because the rest of my address is already in there. And then I just submit this sitemap. So now this is again going to take a little bit of time for Google to actually process. But with this submitted, once Google takes a look at this sitemap, they will then start to visit the pages in it. They may also try to revisit the pages from my HTTP site. Either one of those two actions will get them to the new secure version of my website, though. And again, this will help to speed up the process. Because the quicker these get processed, whether through this sitemap or by visiting the old pages and getting permanently redirected to my new pages, it will again help the secure sites get indexed a lot quicker. So once we have Google Search Console taken care of, this is something we can revisit in the future to see how the progress is going in terms of the secure site getting indexed and the non-secure site getting de-indexed. But beyond that, our work here is basically done for now. So the final piece of today's lesson has to do with Google Analytics. Now, this piece is not necessarily quite as important. However, if you're not already using Google Analytics, I'd recommend for you to add your website in here so you can track the stats closer to real time than what the Google Search Console will give you. You can also get a lot of extra information by having both of these properties set up and linking them together. But for now, what I'm really looking to do within my Down Comforter Guide Google Analytics page, I want to look for the admin link. It's all the way down here on the bottom. If this menu over here is compressed, it's this gear icon, again, all the way down on the bottom. If you hover over it, you can see that it says admin. So I want to visit the admin page. Under property, I want to go to property settings. And then I simply want to change my default URL. So I can switch this from HTTP to HTTPS. So this is a lot easier within the Search Console. You don't even have to set up a brand new property or anything like that. You just change this one quick setting and you go down and you save your changes. This just simply lets Google know that this is indeed the default URL for your site, that you're moving everything over. Without this though, Google Analytics will at least track the traffic that is going to your secure pages, even if you never went in and made this change. But in my opinion, giving Google as much information as you can as far as what is going on with your website, letting them know that you do intend for this site to be accessed securely, this can just simply help to get this transition made faster. It can help, in my opinion, with getting better search rankings by having these different properties connected up properly to your website as well. So now within Google Analytics, we will be able to see the traffic that is coming through our new secured pages. Now again, I mentioned earlier that there is, at least in some cases, there's going to be more to this entire process of making your site secure. But the work that we have covered today is all of the basics. This ensures that when people then start to visit the pages of your website, that it will at least attempt to access them securely, as long as all of the other pieces fall into place. But not going a step further than this and ensuring that your site is completely secure, ensuring that different pieces of media, for example, that they are actually being pulled up securely. This is another one of the main parts that a lot of websites simply end up missing. And so I did want to devote an entire class to this process. There's also going to be a plugin available for you in the next class that's actually going to help to scan your site and quickly alert you to specific problem areas to make this whole process simpler, especially if you have a much larger website. You could go through your site right now after doing the work that I've taught you today, though. You could go through your pages one at a time, visit those pages, and verify whether or not there is more work to be done by just simply looking at the padlock. If you just see the padlock, you're okay. If you see this yellow exclamation point, and especially if you're clicking on this, when you see the yellow exclamation point, it's simply letting you know that the connection is not secure. You can click on it to verify that. It'll tell you right here, connection is not secure. So this simply indicates that there is more to be done. But again, if you have a really large website, um, if you're talking 50 or 100 or even more pages, you probably don't want to manually hunt through all of them in this manner. So that's the point of the next class in this series. That's also the point of the plugin that I will be providing you guys with in that final class. So it'll just scan your entire website and give you a list of all the pages that are going to need your attention, and even point out what on those pages needs to be modified to make your site completely secure. So with just a little bit of additional work, we will be completely wrapped up in making our websites secure. And for at least some people, depending on how you have built your site may already be secured now just from the work that we have covered in today's lesson. So I want to go ahead and open up the floor now to open Q&A. If you have any questions for me having to do with today's class, I welcome those. Just simply type them into the chat box for me.